Giants. The word conjures up fantastical, mythological, and fairy tale like images of beings that have long passed and are but dust beneath the earth. Today, we see basketball players or professional wrestlers of unusual height, or we may thumb through the Guinness Book of World Records and see photos of people of staggering stature, making anyone alongside them look like an action figure. Honestly, even seeing all the quote unquote giants photographed throughout our history and using my imagination to envision giants decked out for Mortal Kombat, I don't really think I'd be too afraid. I mean, they're super tall, but so what? Sounds to me like they would be slow and clumsy and maybe even stupid. Actually, being small and agile, Israel, in fighting the giants that occupied the Promised Land, would have the upper hand. So, why was Israel so afraid of these giants? Well, because according to legends and many extra biblical and apocryphal and deuterocanonical, pseudepigraphal, and rabbinic books, documents, and literature, these giants were said to be the offspring of the fallen heavenly beings who rebelled against God, fell to earth, set up rule from Mount Hermon, and began to teach mankind forbidden knowledge involving sorcery, witchcraft, science, things such as psychotropic drugs, warfare, abortion, and genetic manipulation. You could read the book of Enoch, chapters 6 through 8, to really get a more clear picture of what I'm talking about here. So Moses recaps the history or the story of the parents of the second generation of Israel after the exodus from Egypt, who had the opportunity to take the land from these giants for the first time, but chickened out. So Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 21 through 45 says, in the Christian Standard Bible, it says, "See, the Lord your God has set the land before you. Go up and take possession of it, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, have told you. Don't be afraid or discouraged." Then all of you approached me and said, "Let's send men ahead of us, so that they may explore the land for us and bring us back a report about the route we should go and the cities we will come to." The plan seemed good to me, so I selected 12 men from among you, one from each tribe. They left and went up into the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol, scouting the land. They took some fruit from that land in their hands and carried it down to us and brought us back a report. "The land the Lord our God is giving us is good. But," there's always a but, right? "But you are not willing to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, 'The Lord brought us out of the land of Egypt, hand us over to the Amorites in order to destroy us because he hates us. Boo-hoo! Where can we go? Our brothers have made us lose heart, saying, the people are larger and taller than we are, and the cities are large, fortified to the heavens. We also saw the descendants of the Anakim there.' So I said to you, don't be terrified or afraid of them. The Lord your God who goes before you will fight for you, just as you saw him do for you in Egypt. And you saw in the wilderness how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carries his son, along the way you travel until you reach this place. But in spite of this, you did not trust the Lord your God, who went before you on the journey to seek out a place for you to camp. He went in the fire by night, and in the cloud by day, to guide you on the road you were to travel. When the Lord heard your words, he grew angry and swore an oath. 'None of these men in this evil generation will see the good land I swore to give your fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He will see it, and I will give him and his descendants the land on which he has set foot, because he remained loyal to the Lord.' Then the Lord was angry with me also because of you, and said, 'You will not enter there. Joshua, son of Nun, who attends you, will enter it. Encourage him, for he will enable Israel to inherit it. Your children, whom you said would be plunder, your sons, who do not yet know good from evil, will enter there. I will give them the land, and they will take possession of it. But you are to turn back and head for the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea.' You answered me, "Oh, we have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight, just as the Lord our God commanded us." Then each of you put on his weapon of war and thought it would be easy to go up into the hill country. But the Lord said to me, "Tell them, do not go up and fight, for I am not with you to keep you from being defeated by your enemies." So I spoke to you, but you did not listen. You rebelled against the Lord's command and defiantly went up into the hill country. Then the Amorites who lived there came out against you and chased you like a swarm of bees. They routed you from Seir as far as Hormah. When you returned, you wept before the Lord, but he didn't listen to your request or pay attention to you. For this reason, you stayed in Kadesh as long as you did. Earlier, Moses uses examples of their cousins who did not have the favor of Adonai as they themselves did, and took on the giants and defeated them and took their land to boot. We find this in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 through 22. And it says, "The Emim, a great and numerous people, as tall as the Anakim, had previously lived there. They were also regarded as Rephaim, like the Anakim, though the Moabites called them Emim. The Horites had previously lived in Seir, but the descendants of Esau drove them out, destroying them completely and settling in their place, just as Israel did in the land it possessed the Lord gave them. The Lord said, 'Now get up and cross the Zered Valley.' So we crossed the Zered Valley. The time we spent traveling from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Zered Valley was 38 years, until the entire generation of fighting men had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. Indeed, the Lord's hand was against them to eliminate them from the camp until they had all perished. When all the fighting men had died among the people, the Lord spoke to me, 'Today you are going to cross the border of Moab at Ar. When you get close to the Amorites, don't show any hostility to them or provoke them, for I will not give you the land of the Amorites as a land of possession. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot.' This too used to be regarded as the land of the Rephaim. The Rephaim lived there previously, though the Amorites called them Zamzumim, and a great and numerous people as tall as the Anakim. So the Emim, the Zamzumim, the Rephaim, the Anakim were all giants. Okay, so continuing on, verse 21, the Lord destroyed the Rephaim at the advance of the Amorites, so they drove them out and settled in their place. This was just as he had done for the descendants of Esau who lived in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them. They drove them out and have lived in their land until now." Okay, so we have the descendants of Lot and the descendants of Esau, both who rejected and rebelled against the Lord, who did not have the favor of the Lord as the Israelites did, and yet they conquered a land as their possession, full of giants, whether you call them Emim, the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Zamzumim, whatever. They were giants, the same type of giants that Israel was about to face. And yet these ungodly descendants, their cousins, defeated these giants and dwelt in the land. So Moses was saying, if your ungodly descendants, your cousins, were able to do this, there's no reason that you can't do this, because you have the favor of the Lord on your side. Okay, so later on, Moses describes for us the impressive height of King Og. He was the king of Bashan, and hints at his massive weight that required an iron bed to hold him. Deuteronomy 3:11 says, "For only Og of Bashan remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. It is not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth, after the cubit of a man." So in measurements we would understand, his bed was made of iron, and it was 13 and a half feet long by 6 feet wide. So that's pretty big. That's a pretty big bed, pretty impressive. And this was not just a bed to exaggerate his power and wealth and to compensate for something. This bed was made to fit his, Og's mighty frame, which he was wide and tall, right? Okay, so why did Moses use examples of their rebellious cousins, the children of Esau, Moab, and Ammon, who conquered some of these giants to occupy the land that they have now? Well, he did it as a pep talk to encourage the Israelites to take the promised land. If a people not dedicated to Adonai could defeat these giants, then Israel, whom Adonai is their God and fights for them, should surely be able to defeat these giants. Sounds to me like these giants were more than just tall. And indeed, according to the scripture, tradition, and legend, they were. These giants were the stuff of legends and what myths are made of. Many cite such passages dealing with the giants and the Canaanite peoples they lived among, and the divine injunction to Israel to totally annihilate them, not even sparing animals, women, or children, as God being merciless, unfair, bloodthirsty, barbaric, and cruel. But if one reads the scriptures carefully, people outside the Canaanite people who had no contact with these giants, God commanded Israel to spare the animals, the women, and the children. Why do you suppose this is? Because the Canaanites polluted their genetics by their physical and spiritual union with these fallen angels. Even the animals were genetically corrupted. If you look in the book of Jasher, chapter 4, verse 18, it bears this out. And so God commanded that they all be obliterated so as not to allow the human demonic hybrid in their DNA to continue to pollute humanity or the animal kingdom, and furthermore, so as not to thwart the prophecy of the coming Messiah. Uh, Here in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, we find our first encounter with these giants. When mankind began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took them, as many as they chose for wives for themselves. And the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with mankind forever, because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, or the giants, the word also means the fallen ones, were on the earth both in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind, who bore children to them. They were powerful men of old, the famous men. As I said earlier, the word giants or Nephilim in the Hebrew carries a double meaning. It means giants, yes, but it also means fallen ones, alluding to their fallen nature, that they were divine heavenly beings that fell from the heavens. They were called the fallen ones. Most Christians in this quote unquote enlightened age of today would scoff at even the suggestion that fallen angels could possibly have cohabitated with the daughters of men. Yet this was the original meaning and intent of this very passage. Only in the modern centuries have man tried to explain this away as the wicked daughters of Cain, seducing and marrying the righteous sons of Seth. It's just a bunch of baloney. Every instance in the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament, every instance when the phrase sons of God is used, it is used in direct reference to the divine heavenly and or angelic beings. And it's obvious that the daughters of men were mortal women. Indeed, this is one of the reasons why God deemed the worldwide flood necessary, not just because of the wicked, sinful, and rebellious ways of mankind, but because the fallen angels were impregnating the women in an effort to thwart the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah, the redeeming Messiah. In Genesis 3:15, we have what is called in theological circles the proto-evangelium. This is the prophecy of the redeeming Messiah that is to come, found in Genesis. It says, I will put enmity between the woman, meaning mankind, humankind, purely genetically human, between thy seed, which thy seed is talking about this seed of the serpent, which, is alluding to the fallen angels. But, the seed of the serpent is also, the rebellious, wicked, sinful. There's a physical, literal meaning and a spiritual meaning. So it says, I will put enmity between thee, meaning the seed of the serpent, Satan, his offspring, and the woman, who is purely human. And between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head. So in other words, humankind, the human race will overcome the seed of the serpent and annihilate the seed of the serpent. We see this happening in the book, in the 5 books of Moses, when the Israelites wipe out the Canaanites who had cohabitated and polluted their genetic line with these fallen heavenly angelic beings. It will bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So, in other words, even though the physical descendants of these demonic human hybrid would be eventually wiped out, that spiritual seed of Satan would eventually bruise the heel of the human race. And this was done in the guise of Messiah, because Messiah's heel was bruised when it was nailed to the cross. Okay, so the fact is backed up again and again in Midrashic, Talmudic, and Kabbalistic and rabbinical literature, that the sons of God were the fallen divine heavenly beings / angelic race, and the daughters of men were pure human beings. So Deuteronomy 1:28 says, "Whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our heart, saying, The people is great and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of Anakim there." So Rashi says the descendants of Samchazi and Azael, who fell from heaven in the generation of Enosh. So that's who Rashi, which is a very famous and highly regarded and respected Jewish commentator, that's what he said the Anakim were. They were the descendants of the fallen heavenly angelic beings named Samchazi and Azel, who fell from heaven in the generation of Enosh. So the Hasidic masters explain that the generation of the spies was loath to enter the land because they feared the transition from the spiritual life they led in the desert, where they were sustained by the bread from heaven and all their physical needs were provided by miraculous means, and their sole occupation was to study the Word of God and service to God, to a life on a land, all the material entanglements that brings. So this explains the spies' mention of the sons of the giants they encountered in the land. The Midrash in Yahut Shimoni, Bereshit 44, relates the story of these fallen angels. In the years before the flood, when violence and promiscuity pervaded the earth, 2 angels, Samchazi and Azel, pleaded before the Almighty, "Allow us to dwell among humans, and they shall sanctify your name." But no sooner had the 2 heavenly beings come into contact with the material world that they too were corrupted. So, if these heavenly beings, the spies were saying, could not survive the plunge to materiality, how could, or rather, what could be expected of us, moral and fragile men? So this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. He said, if these heavenly beings were corrupted by materialism, how much more so the human beings, and that's why they were afraid to enter the land. So the extra-biblical books such as Enoch, Jasher, Jubilees, and others, which is what much of the Talmudic and rabbinical writings are based on, are full of accounts linking the fallen angels cohabitating with human women as one of the main reasons for the global Noahic flood. If you look at Syriac, chapter 16, verses 7 through 8, 3rd Maccabees, chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, the Testament of Naphtali, chapter 3, verses 4 through 5, Jubilees, chapter 20, verses 4 through 5, and 1st Enoch 1:9. So all those passages I cited would bear out. So I'm going to read to you Jubilees 5, 1 through 4. It says, "And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon, and they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons that were giants, and lawlessness, or a disregard for God's instructions and commands, his Torah, increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way." How did all flesh corrupt its way? Well, Jubilee says, "Alike men and cattle and beast and birds and everything that walketh on the earth, all of them were corrupted by their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other. and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination and thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. So this passage hints of bestiality, of the chimeric hybrids of animals and humans, of animals and angelic beings. So it was also their genetics, not only their spirit, their morality, their that was being corrupted, but it was also their physical DNA, their physical genetic makeup was being corrupted. So Jubilees goes on to say, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. It was corrupt, it was polluted, it was rotten, and all flesh had corrupted its orders. So God had created everything in a specific order, and the fallen angelic race decided to mix up this order, hybridize this order, create their own order, flip it up on its head. And Jubilees continues and says, and all were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said, I shall destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth which I have created. So, he saw that this hybridization between the heavenly and the earthly was considered evil. And this mixing up of the created order, which God had created, was evil. Why? Because these fallen, divine, heavenly beings were trying to play God themselves, and were teaching man how to play God through genetic manipulation and breeding manipulation. So, if Satan, through his fallen angels, could pollute the human seed, then there would be no pure, untainted human seed for the Messiah to come through. Thus is another reason for the flood and for Noah and his family being spared. This is where the legends of the giants and mythological type beings came from that Greece and Rome are so famous of speaking of, like the Minotaur and the Centaur, and all these kind of things. So as Genesis 6:4 says, there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. So even after the flood, we see the fallen angels continue to have children through human women. Even the shepherd boy and future king of Israel, David, slew a Nephil, a giant, the giant Goliath, as we find in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Later, in 2 Samuel chapter 21, verse 20, we see another Nephil, another giant of Gath, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. So the 6 fingers and 6 toes was one of the demarcations of these fallen, divine, heavenly beings, angels, if you will, and the hybridization between them and human beings. So we even encounter a passage in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, regarding the fallen angels and their Nephilim offspring. In Matthew chapter 22, verses 29 through 30, it says, Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. This passage speaks of heavenly, obedient, unfallen angels, that they don't marry like the fallen ones do. It doesn't say that they can't or don't have the ability to have sexual intercourse and reproduce. It just says that the obedient angels do not marry or are given in marriage, hinting that the fallen ones do. So in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 10, it says, For if God didn't spare the angels who sinned, but cast them into hell and delivered them in chains of utter darkness to be kept for judgment, and if he did not spare the ancient world, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, when he brought the flood of the world on the ungodly, and if he reduced the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes and condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is coming to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, distressed by the depraved nature of the immoral, for as the righteous man lived among them day by day, his righteous soul was tormented by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trial and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment, especially those who follow the polluting desires of the flesh and despise authority. So let's also go to Jude, verses 6 through 7. It says, And the angels, which kept not their first estate. In other words, they didn't stay in the heavenly realm. They didn't stay in the spiritual realm. They didn't stay pure. They didn't stay unwed. It says, but left their own habitation, hinting that they were fallen from heaven or left heaven, came to earth. He revealed He reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the judgment of the great day. So some of these angels that rebelled against God and cohabitated with women, they were somehow seized, captured, and were chained. And are reserved until judgment day. So the verse goes on to say, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication, going after strange flesh. Strange flesh is the King James way of saying that they were not human beings, that they were fallen, divine, heavenly, angelic beings. That's what strange flesh is. It wasn't the same as human flesh. And set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So it's hinting that what the angels, when they rebelled against God and fell from heaven and cohabitated with human women and had these Nephilim, these giants, that it was strange flesh, that it was an abomination against God that deserved judgment of God of eternal fire. So, okay, here, Peter and Jude speak of angels sinning by leaving their natural, heavenly, unmarried state and realm, and hence regarding the Sodomites wanting to have sexual relations with Lot's angelic guests. And some of those who had cohabitated with human women were judged. Now, I personally believe that the activity of these fallen heavenly beings and their Nephilim offspring have not ceased. Because it says that it was during the flood and after the flood, and we see even up until the time of King David, they were still fighting giants, offsprings of these heavenly beings. But I believe that in the modern day, incarnation of these Nephilim are explained through the UFO and alien phenomena. I know, sounds crazy, sounds weird. Think about it, though. It's the same old plan, but a different, more modern package for our quote-unquote space age. Human women are abducted, they are impregnated, and then they're re-abducted to extract the hybrid child, and many of them are shown their progeny before they are, sent back to Earth. There is no proof that these beings come from another planet, but there is evidence leaning towards them coming from another dimension, the spiritual realm. Plus, if these quote-unquote aliens give any kind of message for mankind, it's usually a humanistic or New Age message that belittles Messiah and his word and puts him on a level of other world religions. Also, the same paranormal activity takes place during a poltergeist, as the same type of thing that happens when quote-unquote aliens and their craft are present. To me, this sounds a lot like Nephilim. So, no doubt, this is why Israel was scared to meet these giants on the battlefield and to take the promised land. They were going up against a race not only physically intimidating, but mystically and spiritually intimidating as well. Who knows what type of powers that these beings had, and who knows how embellished these stories of their powers were, which made them that much more ominous in their eyes. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Start your week out with a jolt. Join me, Chris Shoemaker, for the weekly Sunday morning jumpstart. Your Sunday sermon to start your week off right.